I had to go back and watch a selection show on the old DVR because doing some Memorial Day things on a Monday. But we've been talking about this for a while, and I know Whittle has mentioned it for a while. It's not surprising. It's become so predictable that SEC team, not a 1 seed, going to an ACC locale, right? Not a surprise there. I applaud the committee for not being ultra lazy and just sending Carolina to Clemson. I know some people wanted that, sending Florida to Florida State. And, like at some point, the point of the matchups in a tournament are to be unique. So we already see all those games in the regular season. And I realize NC State was the postseason opponent a year ago, but still it's unique to this year. I was in Raleigh in 2008 for the regional there. And here's what I'll tell you. And here's what Coach Lake has talked about. And it's so true, because I can't tell you how many of these things that I've done at both SEC and non-SEC venues. Carolina is going to be in a venue that is nothing like the SEC. It's not going to have the same attendance. It's not going to have the same overall, dare I say, intimidation factor. This is not a knock on NC State fans. It's just different. I'd say that if it was Chapel Hill.
In Raleigh. What do you think about the draw for the Gamecocks, John?
I don't think you could really ask for a better draw, can you? You get one of the last teams in the field is a 3 seed in your bracket. You're not going to one of the top national seeds, top 8 national seeds. I mean, North Carolina's no pushover or anything like that, but I mean, you got to feel really good about the position that you were granted and given, based on what the season looked like for South Carolina. So I mean, I don't think you could have asked for much more.
Should JMU be in the tournament?
I mean, I didn't think so.
Me neither.
I didn't think so, and that's part of the reason why it's a great draw for the Gamecocks. It doesn't mean that that South Carolina is going to go out there and win. Maybe JMU comes out and beats them and shows why they should have been in. But I mean, I thought there were a few teams out there that would probably get in there ahead of JMU. So, I caught the end of y'all talking about College of Charleston, and that one was really, really surprising for me. I thought that they were in by 3 or 4 teams. Not even the last one in. I didn't expect them to be out at all. So I know there's talk about their strength of schedule and so forth, but I mean, the RPI balances the wins and strength of schedule. And if you're up there at 42 as a mid-major in a conference that you don't get to play a bunch of good teams. And I mean, I'm kind of at a loss for words. That they had a game against Duke at the end of the season that was rained out and unable to be scheduled. I'm sure that would have helped their non-conference RPI a little bit, and who knows, it may help their win total as well. But I'm really, really sad for Chad Sawyer Bridges, former Gamecock pitcher, who's an assistant coach down there. Will Dorton, their pitching coach, who's a Lugoff Elgin guy and been in the state for a long time. But of course, there are players too who they start training for this and preparing for the season. About the second the previous season ends, and to have that when you think you're in and to have it taken away, and they're not the first team to ever get snubbed, but it's disappointing to see it when it happens to good folks around you.
It's a better situation to be in. You get to get away from home. And I think in some cases, that's actually a good thing. We all know there are a number of people, we've talked about this, JC, a number of people that quite frankly were Gamecock fans rooting against the Gamecocks so they can prove a point and get the head coach fired. It's sad that that's a reality, but that is a reality for some fans. And so that if the team would fall down early, in let's just say an early game, then you start hearing some boos and the angst in the air. You know what? You don't have to worry about any of that when you're on the road. You just focus on, you just be road dogs. I think that's actually good for this team. I think the draw is a good draw for this team. I like everything about what happened for Carolina from a committee standpoint. Now you just got to go out and play. And you got one of the hottest hitters in college baseball. You got a pitching staff, some guys who came around and maybe earned some wings in Hoover. I mean, to me, I don't think you could have asked for a much better scenario. You're not flying across the country. My guess is they'll get in the bus. I know that's what we did back in 2008. You don't fly to Raleigh. You can easily bus there. And I think it's a good matchup. If you play your best if you just play the kind of baseball minus the defense that you did in Hoover, I think Carolina wins this regional. Now, will they do that? That remains to be seen. But I think overall it's a great draw.
What do you think they got from the SEC tournament? I mean, obviously defensively they fell apart there towards the end of this thing, but they did make a run and they lost a pair of heartbreakers to LSU. Cole Messina should have been the tournament MVP, but he wasn't going to be because they didn't win the tournament or play in the championship game. But what do you think that run did for this team and its confidence going into the postseason?
Yeah, I mean, they were on wobbly knees there at the end of the season. I mean, you get swept at home by Georgia and swept on the road at Tennessee to end the season and lose 6 straight going into the postseason. You're kind of up against the rope, so to speak. You either fall down or you bounce off of them. And I thought those guys did a really good job of bouncing back. And I mean, Alabama, that first game, they were fighting for their tournament lives too. Like nobody thought that. Few people thought that all 13 and 17 teams were guaranteed a spot to get in. With the way it played out, it ultimately happened. But all of those 13 and 17 teams were playing like they had to make it into the tournament. So you go out there, beat an Alabama team that's playing their hardest, and then you turn around and play the way you did. The rest of the way, beating Arkansas, who, they threw off. I mean, there's no doubt about it. They threw off a little bit. And then Kentucky, I mean, you go out there and beat those teams, you feel pretty good. You feel like you've accomplished something. And to be honest, they just gave away the 2 games against LSU. Like, just no 2 ways about it. I mean, when you make such egregious errors like what happened throughout both games, especially late game in that first time they played LSU. I mean, you just give it away, and that's what ultimately happened in those moments. And you have to figure out a way to correct that, because there were some high pressure moments in those mistakes. Like those are the kind of plays you have to make to win ball games. And if you don't make those plays this weekend, then you're going to be home pretty quickly. So you got to figure out a way to be better and make those plays. There has to be a process of work and to get you back to where you're feeling comfortable. And I'm sure that that's what they're going to get to this week is say, and just kind of attack the week and say, all right, this is what we're going to do to get you better, to get you confident, to get you feeling good going into Friday. That being said, I think you see Talmadge back in there this weekend. I think they work with him and try to get him in a good headspace and get him feeling good. He's you only have certain guys that you can play, and he's your best option. You've got to get him feeling like he can do it again. And not put a guy out there who, has been shaky whenever he's been out there. And, Casas isn't going to be able to go with his hand injury. And there's really no other options, to be honest with you. So, you got to back the guy that's been playing there all season and try to get him ready to go.
Yeah, I 100%. I was actually on with Bill this morning in Preston, and they asked me, outside of the obvious, we know that Cole Messina is scolding hot right now. Blake Jackson has just played, in my opinion, a phenomenal role in that 3 spot. They asked me, they said, give me a name, give me 2 names on the offensive side, give me a name on the pitching side that needs to perform well to win the regional. And I said, look, I'll be honest with you. I'm not so sure you can have this conversation without saying Ethan Petrie. Okay. Ethan Petrie is a guy that just has to hit. Right now he's trying to pull everything. He needs to readjust. I think we all saw that. And the other name I said was Talmadge. Like, look, here's the thing. Right now, you've got a bunch of guaranteed outs at the bottom of your order, especially with Casas being out with the hamate. So who takes the reins here? Somebody's going to have to figure something out down there. And I don't know that it can be anybody but him. And you just said the other side of that coin, which is they're not going to be able to run into the locker room and just grow a third baseman real quick and run him out there this weekend. Like, he's your best third baseman. He's going to have to play third base. and they're going to have to do everything they can to get him confident. And then, of course, on the pitching side, I mentioned Eli Jones. We'll get to all that in just a minute. But I agree with you, John. Like, he circle Talmadge Leroy again, and not from a negative standpoint. I don't mean, like, if Talmadge is watching this right now, I think Talmadge has a chance to be a really good player. We've seen him do some good things in a Gamecock uniform. Just clear it up between the ears and go out there and have a hell of a weekend and turn that, turn a negative into a positive.
Yeah, I mean, I think at times this season, Talmadge has just kind of forgotten a little bit who he is, and I think we may have talked about this before on this show. I don't remember, but I just feel like, and he's far from the first player that happens to in their junior year. Like, they start thinking about the draft and start thinking about, okay, well, I need some home runs and I need to, show this defensively, throw this hard across the diamond. I need to do all of these things instead of just going out there and playing ball. And, I just feel like Talmadge at times was trying to do too much offensively instead of being who he is. I mean, and I know I've said this before, like, there were times this year when teams, their scouting report would dictate them to play 3 infielders on the left side of second base, on the left side of the infield, like a dead pull hitter. And, if that's what's happening with Talmadge LaCroix, like, he's dead from the beginning. Like, that's not who he is. Like, Jack Caglione can demand that kind of defense and Ethan Petrie at times, but that's not. I mean, Talmadge needs to be working in the middle of the field. He needs to be using the backside, going the other way with outside pitches. That's just I just think there have been times where he's tried to do too much, and if he can just laser in on the kind of player he is and understand that, this is what I've got to do that's best for this team to win, like, all the good things will come to him, and he'll be just fine at third base. He'll just be just fine offensively. And, I think that he can get to that point. Like you said, he's shown before. Last year he was the Tom Price Award winner of the Clemson series. South Carolina won the Clemson series back in 23, and he was the MVP for the South Carolina side. So, like, he can do it, and he can do it in important moments. So, he hasn't shown that all the time this year, but I think that he can. I think he can do it again.
I don't know. I mean, I'll say this, and then we'll move on. I don't want this to turn into all about Talmadge Leroy here. There's a lot of guys that need to play well for them to win, but you can figure out something else. There are other guys who have played third. Ethan's played third. You could technically even consider Messina over there, although I just would never pull Cole from behind the plate in the most important games of the year coming up. But I also, with all that said, and as willing as Coach Kingston has been to make changes, I don't know that a regional is where you're going to go do things that you just haven't been doing if you can avoid it. Like, I think you'd be better off trying to clean up what you've got. But that's me. What do you think, John?
No, I'm with you 100%. And respectfully, I think both of those ideas are terrible.
I do too.
So
you don't have to say respectfully. It's disrespectfully. Yeah, it's fine.
But you said, you didn't say that's what you would do. You said those are options, and technically, yes, those are options. They're both players who are on the roster. But yes, I wouldn't take Cole Messina out of the catching position. Dalton Reeves did a fine job back there, and it was very important to get Cole some innings out from behind the plate. When you're playing, five games in 5 days, like, you can't do that. But Cole's too good behind the plate to have him not catching games when, if you lose, your season's over.
I put NC State under a microscope a little bit. This is not to take away anything from NC State. It's not going to be a cakewalk by any means. But I think Carolina's roster, top to bottom, is certainly there's not an edge for NC State, particularly if Carolina plays the way they're capable, which is what we saw in Hoover. Again, minus the defense. Look, we've talked about this a million times. It's not going away. You don't all of a sudden become an elite defensive team after playing 60-something games. You are what you are. And, well, what if we put Messina third? Like, no. You don't rob Peter to pay Paul. You don't make radical changes defensively before a regional. That's not the way this works. You're just going to have to win in spite. You're going to go back to the cliche, win anyway. You're going to have to win games in spite of the fact that there is going to be a soul-crushing error at some point in this regional by a Carolina infielder. There just is, okay? So just once you come to grips with that and you realize you're good enough to overcome it, then you'll get rewarded with a super regional if they can do it.
I agree with you, Mike. And you think about, I said this at the top of the show before you joined us. I think the committee actually was a fan of South Carolina's resume, probably more so than D1 Baseball, Baseball America, all four of us, the fans, maybe even the players. Heck, I don't know. But that's not a team that looked like you don't put a team that was questionable as to even make it in the number 10 seed as the 2. Usually they're up going to Clemson, or they'll go to a North Carolina top 4 seed, something like that. So I think it speaks volumes, and it is fair. I mean, NC State's a very good baseball team. I hated what happened to them in Omaha a couple of years ago.
Yeah,
they do have passionate fans, but you're right. Getting out, and we saw it last year when South Carolina got outside of the SEC. When it got to be regional time, all you heard was Campbell this and Campbell that, and oh my God, Central Connecticut State's got a good pitcher, and oh my God, and then Carolina won that regional. They smacked everybody.
The game, it's a 2:00 first pitch, 1:45. You'll hear the great Derek Scott and Stuart Lake on the Gamecock Sports Network this Friday. But James Madison, who I'm with you, there's an argument to be made. They probably shouldn't even be here, but they are, and they're capable of winning ball games. They do swing it well overall. I'm not so sure they're very good on the mound. I think if I saw this correctly, their team ERA is up over 6. Matter of fact, here you go, John. Here's my bold, eye-popping statement. Of the 4 teams in this regional, South Carolina's got the best pitching staff of all 4. There you go. I'll just get that out of the way. That's what I believe. But looking at James, what do you know about James Madison? How much homework have you done on him?
A little bit, and you're pretty much right on what you're saying. And I do agree that South Carolina's pitching staff is probably the best amongst the teams in the regional. I think NC State's numbers are a little bit inflated because of they play in a ballpark that's pretty hitter friendly, and their offensive numbers are really good too. So I think those are probably a little bit high, but then if you played in a place that wasn't quite so hitter friendly, but that's where everybody's playing this weekend too. So we'll see how all that goes. So yes, JMU hits the ball pretty well. They'll hit it around the park a little bit. South Carolina's pitchers are going to have to be on point. They've got some length in their lineup. Like their 7-hole hitter has hit 16 home runs and hits 310, and he's down in their 7-hole. They're gonna not only do they have some guys who hit for some power, they'll put some pressure on you. They'll run some plays. They'll hit and run. They'll do some things offensively where they're trying to pressure a defense. And we saw this past week that South Carolina wasn't real clean defensively, so they're going to have to tighten some things up. And I feel quite confident in saying that if James Madison gets guys on base, they're going to try to exploit some of South Carolina's defensive deficiencies. So that's kind of where things are from that standpoint. I think, and that makes this week of practice all the more important.
So, at the end of the day, they're going to go to the what do you think from a pitching standpoint? Like I feel like personally, they're probably trying to go ahead and this is our game 1 guy, this is our game 2 guy, kind of period, the end going into it. That's what I would think. Let's get this sucker back on track, and then we can go TBA on Sunday if we happen to get that far. But what do you think they'll do from a staff standpoint and how they'll set up their rotation?
Yeah, I think you're exactly right, and that's sort of what I put in the VIP room last night. I think that they're going to lean towards being a little bit more traditional and handle their pitching staff like most normal teams do, and name a couple of starting pitchers and and try to give them an opportunity to pitch 5 or 6 innings. And maybe it doesn't work. I mean, maybe they get hit a little bit and you have to pull a guy, but I don't think they're going to go in on the with the thought process of I'm only throwing this guy the first time through the order, and then I'm going to this guy the second time through the order, like we've seen a little bit here the last couple of weeks. And to me, I think you start out with Eli Jones and say, you've been my ace all year. You've been our best pitcher, most consistent pitcher all year long. You're our guy. You're our team leader. You're our emotional leader from a pitching standpoint. This is a postseason. Here's the ball. Go do the job. And then I think you do the same with Garrett Gainey the next day. And you see what happens after that. I don't pitch Garrett Gainey on Friday. I pitch Garrett Gainey against NC State. You got a guy in Chris Veach who looked just special against Alabama. And you hope you get that Chris Veach back. You got Ty Good. You had guys in the SEC tournament who stepped up and play well. But I give the ball to Eli and then figure it out from there. Like when you talk about guys who are like extra important or key guys for a regional or a tournament, whether it's a pitcher or a hitter, it's like, okay, who can perform up here but has been performing a little bit more down here. I think a guy that's going to be pretty important. This weekend is Matthew Becker. He had some really good performances, out there in Hoover and looked like himself again in some ways. So he's one that I circle who could have a big influence on this weekend. That's not to say that he's been bad all year, because he's been good. He was good a lot of the year. Like I know that some folks out there don't really realize that, but he's made a lot of improvements in some ways this year. And I think that especially after this past weekend and performing well, and if Garrett Gainey is in a starting role, you need a lefty who can come out of the bullpen a little bit too. And Matthew did that a few times this past weekend. And I think that he's just as big as anybody when it comes to the pitching staff.
Do it. That's the way I look at it. But I think overall is a good draw. By the way, 2008, I remember it really well. Reese Havens had a game he'd like to forget, unfortunately, and that was so un-Reese-like to have a 3-error game at shortstop. But do you remember
that was in Chapel Hill?
That was in Chapel Hill?
2007. Oh, yeah.
Somebody had a bad defensive play in 08 in Raleigh.
Might have been Darnell.
It might have been. Yeah.
I think
we'll blame it on the California kid.
Yeah.
Somebody had a really rough error. I know that. That was big in that 2008 regional. But do you remember who the starting second baseman was for NC State? I was taking a look at my old scorebooks. Oh, this name is going to blow you away. If I had a gift card from D's Wings on me, I would give it away to the first person that gets this, but somebody will just Google it. Starting second base. I'll give you a clue. He's still playing today at the professional level.
Russell Wilson.
Boom! JC wins the prize.
Head
on with these, JC.
You're right. Yep, Russell. Yep.